Hello everybody! Welcome again to Storytime from the Milledgeville Public Library of Illinois. The story we have for you today comes from Poland, and it's the story of three sisters and a little bit of danger that they got themselves into. This is the story of the Enchanted book. Once, long ago, there was a miller. Now this miller, he didn't have any sons, sadly, but he did have 3 daughters. And his daughters were very beautiful, but they were very different. The eldest daughter had hair as black as the wing of a raven. Her face was pale and fair as if it had never seen sunlight, and in fact, it hadn't seen very much, for she liked to keep herself out of the sun. The greatest thing in life that she wanted was just to be beautiful. And so she was always looking at herself in mirrors and asking people, "Does this flower wreath look good on me? Perhaps should I wear my hair down? Or would it be more beautiful in braids or pinned up on my head perhaps? Oh, does this scarf become me? Does it look good? Or is it bad? Does it not look beautiful? Oh dear." That was the eldest daughter. The middle daughter had hair as red as the leaf of the birch tree. Her eyes were as green as waters running deep. And what she loved most in the entire world was to play and to dance. She spent all her time going to wedding feasts and celebrations and parties. In fact, the boys in the village joked that she didn't have the strength in her legs or in her head to do anything except for dance. The youngest daughter was golden-haired and her eyes were as blue as the flax blossoms. She looked, well, she had a bit of a rosy glow to her, very much like, well, rather like, have you ever seen the dawn when the sun is just coming up and everything is rosy and golden? That was the youngest daughter. Now, what she loved most in the world was to learn how to do things. She liked to do all of the work. She begged her mother to teach her how to spin the thread so very fine. And she begged her mother to wake her up early in the morning on dawn on bread making day so that she could learn how to knead the dough and make the bread. She begged her father to teach her how to drive the horses so that she could go to the nearby town and pick up the things they needed for the mill. For, she said, "Father, you have no sons, so one of your daughters must learn how to help you." She loved to work and to learn new things. Well, one year, as the 3 girls were getting on to being grown up, the autumn came, and this particular day, well, it was very much as autumn sometimes is. The wind was blowing and whistling cold about the building, and the rain was falling, and everything was drenching wet and so cold and gloomy. And a knock came on the door. And when they opened the door, they found outside a poor beggar woman, and she just wanted a crust of bread and to sit by the fire for a few moments. Well, the miller and his family were very kind people, and so they brought her in and they let her sit by the fire, and they gave her a big bowl of hot soup and some bread, and she began to eat. And when she was done eating, she said, "Now, to thank you for the wonderful meal, I shall read you some wonderful tales." And she reached into her bag and she brought out a great big book fastened shut with a strap. Well, the family was very surprised to find that an old beggar woman was so learned as to be able to read. But the youngest daughter jumped up and she fetched a clean cloth from the linen chest, and she brought it over and laid it over the old beggar woman's lap. And the beggar woman opened the book and she began to read. And she read them such tales about a set of twins who were stolen from their mother, a forester's wife, and they were taken out into the forest and raised by a she-wolf and a she-bear. One of them was raised by the wolves and drank the wolves' milk, and the other was raised by the bears and drank the milk of the bears. And they were so enriched by that wonderful milk and being raised with the wolves and the bears that they grew up to be great giants of men. That they would walk through the forest and say, "Oh, it has not been a very good year. The grass has barely grown to my knees." But it wasn't grass they were walking through, but all of the big, tall oaks and larches and birches and pines. When they were walking across the countryside, if there was a house in their way, they would simply step over the top of it. And if they wanted to look at a cow down on the ground, they would pick it up and hold it in their hand like you and I would hold a kitten. One of the brothers was named Oak Uprooter, and he took oaks from the Tukolsky forest and he pulled them up and he carried them on his shoulder and he planted them in the Nepolemika wilderness near Wawel. For the royal castle was at Krakow, and the Wawel castle was there, and the king lived there, and the king wanted to have forests to hunt in. And so Oak Uprooter planted him forests. Cliff Smasher, the other brother, he went to where the Tatra Mountains are now, and he lifted up the Tatra Mountains from deep underneath the earth. And he took his axe and he carved valleys into the mountains for the waters to run through the rivers and the streams. And then he sharpened the peaks of those mountains with his axe so that the clouds would snag and fly to tatters instead of getting caught and drenching the earth in torrential rains. Well, word spread that there was an old woman reading wonderful tales in the miller's house, and many people came and packed into the room, and they were listening to the wonderful stories, and they could not decide which was more amazing, Oak Uprooter or Cliff Smasher, or the old grandmother who could take these odd little black marks on the page and tell such wonderful stories from them. Well, eventually, the old grandmother stopped reading and everyone else went home. And the miller's wife was thinking. And she said she was a very clever woman, although she had not had any book learning herself. And she said to the old grandmother, "Grandmother, now is not the time to be wandering from house to house to house to house, trying to find food and lodging. Winter is coming, and winter is cold and damp, and the food is hard to find. Grandmother, why don't you stay with us this winter? We will give you food and a room to sleep in, and in return, you will teach my daughters to read." Well, the old grandmother thought that was rather a good choice, a good trade-off. And so she agreed to stay with them for the winter. Well, the first week came, and it was the eldest daughter's turn to go into the old grandmother and learn how to read. She came into the room, and the grandmother opened the book, and she began to show some things to the eldest daughter. And the eldest daughter said, "Oh, grandmother, I am so sorry. I just saw out the window that the pig has gotten into mischief. I will be back as soon as I tend to the pig." And she ran out of the room. The pig had not gotten into any mischief. She just didn't want to learn how to read. She felt it was boring, and it did not help her be beautiful. And so she ran off to the neighbors to look at new clothes, and the old grandmother snoozed in her room. And so the week passed. When the second week came, the middle daughter came into the grandmother, and the grandmother opened the book and began to show her how to read. But the middle daughter said, "Oh, grandmother, I just forgot. I need to go hang the laundry on the fence to dry. I will be right back as soon as I do that." And she ran out of the house. But there was no laundry to hang on the fence. She had heard some music coming from the neighbor's house across the bridge, and so she ran off to the neighbor's house to dance, and the grandmother snoozed in the corner. Well, so went the second week. The grandmother dozed, while the mother thought that her children were learning to read. But when the third week came, the youngest daughter went in to the old grandmother, and the grandmother opened the book and began to show her the letters and teach her how to read. And the youngest daughter was fascinated. She thought this was the most amusing thing ever. Grandmother, now, what does this funny little letter with the hook on it say? And what about this one that looks like a rock, a circle? And what about this one that stands so tall and proud? How do you say this one? And until dusk, she continued to ask the grandmother questions and learning and more things. And as the week went by, she learned more and more letters and more words. And she went and she fetched a piece of smooth wax and a stick, and she began to learn how to write the letters on the wax. And by the end of the week, she could read a little bit. And as the days and the weeks went by of winter, she learned to read a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, until by the end of the winter, when the old grandmother packed up the book and began to travel on her way again, the youngest daughter could read anything you put in front of her. Quick as a flash, she could figure out what the word was, and she could read it and tell you what it meant. Well, word of the miller's daughters began to spread far and wide. It was told widely about that they were very beautiful. Well, the eldest daughter was. And they had very high spirits, as the middle daughter did. And they were very wise and learned and knew how to read and write. But only the youngest daughter did. But that didn't matter. Everyone abroad began to talk about all three of the girls as if they were all beautiful with high spirits and loved learning. Well, news of these three beautiful, spirited, and wise young ladies came to the ears of an old enchanter. Now, this enchanter was ugly. He was tall and skinny as a beanpole with a long, scraggly beard. His ears were floppy like bats, and his nose looked like a puffball. But he decided that he needed to get one of those girls as his wife, for she would be so beautiful that it would be a pleasure to look at her. And with such high spirits, she would always be happy. And so very learned, she would be able to run his house very well. And so he dressed himself up as a traveling peddler with an old coat and a big bag full of trinkets and handkerchiefs and bangles and ribbons. Oh, all sorts of things that a young woman might like. And he came to the village and he called out that he had all sorts of trinkets to sell. And the eldest daughter saw him, and she called to him to come up on the porch in the shade where she wouldn't get her face darkened, and to show her what he had to sell. And he pulled out his handkerchiefs and his bangles and his ribbons and pins and beads and rings and scented soaps and all sorts of pretty things. And all the eldest daughter was in raptures, and she bought as much as she possibly could. Well, when she was done buying it all, he packed everything else back up into his bag. And then he said to her, "Now, I beg you, good maiden, I need to go to the crossroads now, but I don't know how to get there. Could you possibly walk me to the crossroads?" And she said that she would. And she put on her hat so her face wouldn't get burnt. And she walked him to the crossroads. And when he got there, he said to her, "Oh, thank you so very much for walking me here. You've been so kind to help me out. I should like to give you something. I have this golden apple." It was a very pretty apple, and the eldest daughter thought that it might be a very pretty trinket to have. And he said, "Here, this is for you." And as she reached out to take it, he just tipped his hand, and it slipped out and fell, and it hit the ground, and it started to roll. And he said, "Oh no, catch it, catch it." And she ran after it. And every time she thought she was about to catch it, it would roll a little bit further. And in that way, it rolled across a road and a road and a field and a field and a wood and a wood, and all the way right up to the very edge of an abyss, a great canyon. And the eldest daughter reached down and she picked up that apple off of the edge of the abyss. But as soon as she did, she lost her balance and she tumbled down into the abyss. Well, When she reached the bottom, she was a little shaken, but not at all bruised. And much to her surprise, she found that the peddler was standing just there beside her. And he told her that he was not a peddler, but instead a great enchanter, and this was his castle. And she looked and she saw a grand castle with marble walls and crystal windows and a silver roof. And the enchanter said that he should very much like to have the eldest daughter come and live here at the castle with him. And he took her inside, and she saw that all of the walls were beautifully painted, and there were bear skins on all of the floors, and carpets on all of the benches, and all of the plates and the cups were made of silver. And there were chests and chests of clothes everywhere. She was so excited to try on all the beautiful clothes. And the enchanter took her into the dining room, and he said, "This table, if you sit down at this table and tell it what you would like to eat, it will give you whatever you wish." Well, that sounded wonderful to the eldest daughter. She didn't have to work. She would have all these beautiful things to try on, and whatever she wanted to eat, whenever she wanted it, this sounded wonderful. But the enchanter said he had one more thing to show her. And he took her into a hallway where there was a small door at the end. And he said, "Now this room here, this room is forbidden. This room you must not enter or you will be punished." "All right," said the eldest daughter, "I won't go into that room, I promise." And so the enchanter said he had some things to do out in the wide world. And off he went to do his evil deeds. Well, as the eldest daughter wandered through the house, trying on all of the dresses, she found that she was still carrying the golden apple. And so she tucked it into her pocket, and she continued trying on dresses. And then when she was hungry, she went and she sat down at the table, and the golden apple was bumping her so she pulled it out and put it on the table. She asked the table for what she wanted to eat. And she ate her food, and then she took the golden apple with her, and she put it back in her pocket. She wandered through the castle again, trying on jewelry, looking in the mirrors, finding what was the most beautiful thing. And at night, she slept in a very soft bed. Well, after a few days of this, the eldest daughter, she started to get bored. And so she was wandering through the castle, trying to find something new to do. All of the clothing, she tried it on. She tried on the jewelry. She looked in all the mirrors. It was getting boring. And then she came to the end of the hallway, and she saw that small door at the end. And she thought, well, he's not here. He won't know if I go into the room and just look and see what's there. Perhaps the most beautiful dress of all is in that room. And so she opened the door and she went inside. And what she found was that the room was lined with cages full of the most beautifully colored birds. And on the table in the middle of the room was a great big book. Well, the eldest daughter really wasn't interested in birds, no matter how beautiful they were. And she couldn't read, so the book didn't mean anything to her. And so she left the room and she closed the door behind her, and she went back to wandering the castle and trying on clothing and jewels. A short time later, the enchanter returned, and he asked her what she'd been doing while he was gone. And she told him she'd been trying on the clothes and the jewels and having wonderful meals and sleeping in the soft bed. And he asked her if she had gone into the room that he told her not to. And she said, "Oh, no, of course I didn't. You told me not to." And he said, "Let me see the golden apple." And when she pulled it out of her pocket, much to her surprise, it was not golden anymore. It had black spots all over it. It looked like it was rotting. And the enchanter said, "You lied to me and you disobeyed me. Now you must be punished." And he took her and he locked her up in the shed until he decided what to do with her. But while he was thinking about it, he realized that he still very much wanted a wife. Somebody beautiful to look at, and high-spirited to be happy and gay in his new life, and someone wise to run his house for him. But the eldest daughter clearly had not been that. So perhaps he would go back for another of the miller's daughters. And so he dressed himself up like a rich nobleman with very fancy clothes and a fancy hat with plumes and rich jewels all over him, pins and necklaces and all sorts of things. And then, the most important part, he put on a pair of red shoes. For everyone in that part of the world knew that if you were wearing red shoes, you were going to go dancing. He was still a very ugly man, but his clothes were so very eye-catching. He thought that might do. And so he went off to the village again. This time when he approached the village, the miller's middle daughter was out with the ducks, trying to call them off from the mill pond so that she could give them some food. And he walked up to her and he said, "Excuse me, young lady, I'm on my way to my brother's wedding, but the wheel on my carriage, it's broken and I need a blacksmith to fix it. Could you possibly show me where the forge is?" Where the middle daughter really did not want to be feeding the ducks. She was only doing it because her mother had told her to. And so she dropped the bowl of food right there and she said, "Gladly, sir, I would." And she began to lead him toward the village. Well, when they reached the edge of the village, he said, "Now, I think we've gone far enough. If you could just show me, point which of the houses is the forge." And so she pointed to the blacksmith's house. And the man said to her, "Thank you, good lady. Here, I have something for you, a golden apple. Would you like, please take this, as a thank you." And as she reached to take it, he tipped his hand and the apple fell on the ground. And he said, "Oh no, I dropped it, catch it," as it rolled away. And off the apple rolled, and off the middle daughter chased it, off across the road, and a field, and a wood, to the edge of an abyss. And when the apple stopped rolling, she picked it up from the edge of the abyss, and she lost her balance, and she too fell down into the abyss, and found herself outside the castle with the rich nobleman standing just there. He told her he was an enchanter, and that she was here to live in his castle with him. She looked at the beautiful castle with the crystal windows and the silver roof, and she thought it might be nice to live there. And the enchanter took her inside and showed her all the beautiful things, but she didn't seem impressed by the clothes. And so he asked her, "What do you like to do best?" And she said, "Oh, I love best of all in the world to dance." "Ah," said the enchanter, "then I have something for you." And he took her over and he showed her a magic box. And he said, "When you turn this little crank, it will play music, whatever kind of music you wish. And then you can dance. Now I must go out into the world, but let me show you one more thing first." And he took her to the hallway and he said, "Do you see that room just there? Do not go into that room. It is forbidden. For if you go into that room, then you will be punished." "Well, I do not think I shall go into that room then. I do not wish to be punished," said the middle daughter. "Very well," said the enchanter. "Then I am going to go out into the great wide world and do my work." And out he went into the world to do his evil mischief. Well, the miller's middle daughter enjoyed quite some time eating at the magic table and dancing to the music from the music box. But after a while, she got a little bored of that. And she began exploring the palace and looking about her. And then she came to that one door that she was not supposed to go into. But she thought to herself, "The enchanter is not here, and he won't know that I've gone into it. And perhaps on the other side of that door is something even more special to dance to, more music or something like that." And so she opened the door and she went into the forbidden room. And she too found the cages of beautiful exotic birds and the book on the table in the middle. But she wasn't any more interested in colorful birds than her older sister had been, and she couldn't read any more than her older sister could, and so she turned around and left the room. And when the enchanter returned, he found that her apple, too, was rotten, and so he locked her in the shed to try to figure out what to do with her. But he still didn't have a wife. Now he was going to have to go back to the village and find himself a wife. And so he set off. He dressed himself up as a beggar. His sandals were made out of bent twigs. He had an old muddy coat and an old sack with some bread in it, and a stick to keep the dogs away. And he walked into the miller's courtyard, and the miller's youngest daughter was standing there, and she was feeling very sad, for her sisters had disappeared, and her parents were very worried. And she saw the old beggar, and she went in the house, and she fetched him a piece of bread, for she figured he was probably hungry. And when she gave him the piece of rye bread, he took it and thanked her very much, and he put it into his bag, and he said, "My eyesight is not very good. Could you possibly walk me across the courtyard so that I don't trip and fall and hurt myself?" And the youngest daughter, who was a very kind young woman, said of course she would. And as they reached the edge of the courtyard, the old beggar pulled out the golden apple and offered it to her. And again, as she reached for it, he tipped his hand, and off it went, across a road and a road, and a field and a field, and a wood and a wood, and up to the edge of the abyss. And when the miller's youngest daughter bent down to pick it up, she too fell into the canyon. Well, when she stood up, no bruises, but a little shaken, she found the enchanter standing there beside her. And he told her that she was here to live with him in this castle. He took her inside, and he showed her the table and all of the beautiful things. But she was so beautiful and so gentle that he didn't even tell her to stay out of the forbidden room, for he thought to himself that even if she went into the forbidden room, he was not going to send her away. She was so beautiful. He wanted to live with her and look at her every single day. Well, off he went into the world to do his mischief. And the poor youngest daughter, she was so upset. She knew that this enchanter had probably stolen all of her other two sisters, and that her parents would be so upset that they were all of them gone now, that they might not live. They would be so sad. And she felt so terrible about that she began to cry. She didn't eat anything that day, and she in fact went to the bed and just cried and cried and cried until she finally fell asleep. Well, the next morning when she woke up, her good sense had taken over, and she realized that while she still felt sad and worried about her parents and her sisters and herself, that crying wasn't going to help anything, and that she was going to need to figure out a way to get away from here, and perhaps even to find her sisters and save them if she could. And so she began walking through the palace, trying to find a way out. But all of the windows had bars on them, and all of the doors were locked. Finally, eventually, she found that one door at the end of the corridor, the forbidden room, and she went inside. And what she saw there was all of the beautiful birds in their cages. And she felt so sad for them, for they were locked up as much as she was, and they would never be free from their cages, and that just didn't seem fair. And she said to them, "You poor things, shut in these cages with no food and water, I wish I could free you." And then suddenly the birds all woke up, and they lifted their heads, and they lifted their wings, and they said, "We hear the words of pity plain. We want to live again, to live again." The miller's daughter was surprised. She had never heard of a bird that could speak before. "What kind of magic birds are you that you can talk the human tongue?" "Though we have feathers, birds we are not, but each a girl the old man caught. Peasant daughters all are we. Birds we have been turned to, as you can see." Summers come, winters come, and they go. We sit locked up, full of woe. Springtimes pass, autumns pass. When will we be saved at last? And from the corner, all of a sudden, the youngest daughter heard her sister's voices. Here we are, come and see. Your two sisters, come and set us free. Well, the miller's daughter ran over to the corner, and there in a little tiny cage were two beautiful nightingales. And she was trying to get to them through the cage, but she couldn't get it open. She said, I can't get the cage open. What do I do? Well, the birds that had been there longer began to call out again. How to open the doors of our cages is explained in the magic book's pages. If you can read the words in the book, you'll learn how to free us. So hurry and look. Well, the miller's youngest daughter looked around and she saw the thick book closed up with 7 clasps lying on the table. And she went up to the book and she opened all 7 of the clasps, and she opened up the book and she began to turn the pages, looking to see if she could find anything about how to get the birds out of the cages. And then she found a page that had a picture of a lock on it. And on the page it was written, if you wish to open a chest, cage, door, or whatever is locked, take the magic blade of grass, hold it against the closed lock, and say these words, you are proud, humble yourself. You are closed, open yourself. So I command you for the first time, the second time, and for the third time. On the page of the book was a dried blade of grass, and the youngest daughter wondered if perhaps this could be the magic blade of grass. And so she picked it up, and she walked up to one of the cages, and she held the grass against the cage, and she said, you are proud, humble yourself. You are closed, open yourself. So I command you for the first time, for the second time, and for the third time. And suddenly, quickly, the door of the cage sprang open, and the beautiful bird inside flew out. Oh, what joy! This was wonderful! And so quickly she held the blade of grass against all of the cages and opened them all up. And the happy birds flew out, and they flew about the room, and then they sat in a row on the windowsill. And they turned their heads, and they flapped their wings, and they said, look further, read further. And so the miller's daughter kept looking in the book, and aha! Here was a page with a picture of a nightingale. And on this page it said, if you wish to turn a person into a bird, stand facing the east. Turn on your heel 3 times from left to right and say these words. Edzu bedzu chamarai, words which cast a spell say I. Your appearance has changed. Clanzan ranzired, you are now a bird. If you wish to reverse the spell and turn the bird back into a person, do and say all of this backwards. Well, 1, 2, 3, the miller's daughter stood facing the west. She turned 3 times on her toes from right to left, and she said, bird, now are you? Zerd ran tlan, changed has appearance your. I say spell a cast which words, chamaray edzu bedzu. And another wonder took place. The 20 birds that had been arrayed on the windowsill disappeared, and now there were 20 maidens standing around the room, clapping their hands and thanking her so much. She hugged her 2 sisters. And the miller's daughter said, we should go now before the enchanter comes back. Let us flee. And so she picked up the magic blade of grass, and she picked up the big book, and off they went through the room with all of the girls following her off to the castle gate. And when she got to the castle gate, each door that she touched with the blade of grass and she said the little rhyme, it flew open before them. And when they got to the castle gate, they came out through the castle gate and up they climbed, up through out of the abyss, across through the wood and a wood, and across a field and a field, and down a road and a road, and back to their village. And as they got to where the girls had all come from, they all split off to go to their homes. And the miller's 3 daughters went back to the mill. And the miller's youngest daughter, as they were coming back to the mill, they heard a great noise behind them, a clamor and a clatter, and they realized the enchanter was chasing them. Well, the miller's youngest daughter set the book on a bench, and as quick as possible, she flipped through it, and then she found a page with a picture of a mouse. And quickly, she read it very quickly, and she picked 3 leaves off the bush nearby, and she said, "Hocus pocus, shoo me bine, listen to these words of mine. 3 leaves in a cross, I face my house, may the enchanter turn into a mouse." Well, when she turned to look, the enchanter was just coming into the courtyard. But as soon as the spell was cast, he immediately began to shrink and shrink and shrink. So even as he ran forward, he ran slower and shorter and shorter distance. And pretty soon, he turned into a little tiny gray mouse. Well, the miller's cat had been aroused by all of this clamor, and he had been sitting on the porch watching all of these things happen. And he saw that plump, fat little mouse, and he thought it looked like a good snack. And so he jumped down and he caught the mouse and he gobbled it up. And as soon as he did, there was a bit of a rumble and a shaking in the ground. No one was quite sure what it was. But later they found out that the enchanter's castle had disappeared into the ground from where he had brought it up as soon as he had been killed by the mouse eating him. And the enchanter's youngest daughter, she took the big book and she wrapped it carefully in a cloth. And they sent it down the river with some traders to the king at the Wawel Castle in Krakow. And the book is kept there in the castle library, chained to the wall. All of its magic is gone now, for the magic blade of grass crumbled and fell to dust many, many years ago. And the miller's 3 daughters all married and grew and had children who grew up and had children who grew up and had children, and told the story of the enchanted book. And that is the story of the enchanted book from Poland. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll come back and join us again next Friday when we'll have another story for you here from the Milledgeville Public Library of Illinois at 3 p.m. Central Time. I hope you have a great day, everyone. Bye.